So we're going to talk about ERGH. I'm assuming he pronounces his name ERGH. That's how it's spelt, or ERGH. Good name, right? Great name, great letters. Let's talk about his work. So, first of all, let's talk about form. Overall form of this piece. We're going to look at 3 pieces by ERGH. This is the first one. And what you'll see straight away, I want to sort of bring your attention to letter sizing. So he's done a larger B, and then he shrinks his O down a little bit smaller. And his letters, over the next 4 letters, they get slightly progressively larger. So it's a very aesthetically pleasing shape. It begins very big. It very quickly steps down, and then it slowly just gets a bit bigger as you push through the piece. There's something about that which is aesthetically pleasing. Don't ask me why. I don't understand the physics of it, but it is. It's nice to look at. It's what we call dynamic. It has a dynamism. It has an energy. If you look at the form of his letters, he makes the letters dance. They move nicely and they maintain proportion. Look at the proportions of the letters. Look at the way in the bits where the letter bars taper, how they match with other letters. The sizing of the bars, if you've noticed, these letters are what we would call, or what I would refer to as bottom heavy. So the weight of these letters sits at the base of the letter largely, or you could say the first roughly 2/3 of the letter are taken up with the majority of its mass. I tend to work the other way around. Interestingly, to give you a contrast, my letter mass tends to sit up at the top of the letters. ERGH is working the other way round. Now, if you look at the way he's beefed them up a little bit, he's actually done a very nice 3D on it. Now, he's done the 3D same colour as his outline, and his 3D is going off in a 45-degree direction to the northeast, if you like, or the top right. And again, it just gives his letters a bit more weight and a bit more body to do that. They are less flat in doing that. And what he's also done is given us a light source that is coming from the top left. So he's got highlights on the top left of his letters, and he's got a shadow on the right hand side of his letters. All of this adds body, adds weight, makes it more like you're looking at a 3-dimensional object. All of it helps the human brain to kind of fool itself into thinking that you're looking at something solid. And overall, a really beautiful dynamic as well, one that really moves. I'm sure you could agree. Now let's look at some of the details on this, because some of the details on this really, really sell it. Now there's tiny little shadow details on here. Little shadow details. And all they do, again, they fool the brain into thinking that you're looking at something 3-dimensional. And they're just tiny hinted at things. You've got a sort of what I'd refer to as a foreground detail in this line here. This line throws its own shadow. And because it throws its own shadow, it lifts it towards us. It's a device that a lot of artists use. I use it with whips and stuff like that. Loads of different artists use it in loads of different ways. It's just a way of giving you an extreme foreground, behind that a foreground, behind that a background, sometimes behind that an extreme background. Making what isn't essentially an object look like an actual object, like an object that exists in 3D space. What other details are we looking at? We're looking at line weight. I want you to look at how these letters connect up. He hasn't connected them all in the same way. It gives us a nice bit of variation. The B and the O are joined here, and you can see the way the line weight tapers in there. So it also offers a nice contrast. You can see how you can really judge how thick the line weight actually is on the letters, and because you can see how it tapers to a point there. And then on the other letters, the N, the E, the S, they are all joined together. They all sort of meld together. And again, same way of doing it. The lines taper in. Very nice. Quick word about the colour as well. These colours have been really nicely chosen. What you get is what we call a contrast. Now let's just start with his backgrounds for a second. He's got this sort of green, what would you call it exactly? It's a sort of a green shadowy type of puddle down here. And then you've got a blue cloud. Green and blue are really nice contrasting colours that go very nicely together. And that's just your background, And he's given us quite a hard contrast because he's given us a very, very pale green and a very dark blue. And so he's given us quite a solid contrast there. Now, the colours he's chosen for the piece are a really sort of beautiful, delicious contrast, really, of a sort of creamy beiges and this sort of mauve colour. I think you'd call that mauve. Certainly a sort of purple-pink derivative. And them two colours go together really beautifully. I've used that combination myself. Really, really nice colour combination to put together. So everything on this piece hangs together really, really nicely. I've not even mentioned the sort of the thematic details, which are the bones that are sticking out. That's whatever conceit you come up with. You can sort of run with. He's got the bones sticking out of his piece there. Again, they offer depth because they throw shadow, and they give you a bit of interesting variation. He's got a little tombstone down the front with his ERGH on, so it just gives it a bit of a theme for you to enjoy as well. And of course, the name Bones, it's all thematic, it's all congruent, all hangs together very nicely. So yeah, really, really nice piece. Let's look at another one. Really beautiful, beautiful colours. Really nice sort of pink and a sort of almost an orangey yellow, goldy kind of orangey yellow. Great highlights on there. Again, you see the same stuff basically, really nice stuff, and you see something else here as well. I'm going to talk about that in a second. So first of all, line weight, tapering lines, beautiful highlights on there. We've got a black outline and a black shadow, very hard black shadow. Then he's done this thing where he's got a fluorescent cloud behind it, which is very striking, really, really striking. And it's really nice what he's done with this shadowing, because what he's done with the shadowing is he's got, if you look at the fluorescent cloud, he's used a much, much darker value green to do a shadow onto that cloud. And then on the white behind, he's used a grey. And so it looks like it's the same shadow. It fools the eye into thinking that the object is casting a shadow. And it's a very clever device. It's a really nice device, and he's used it throughout the whole piece to throw shadow in that way. I mean, it's also worth mentioning that to become this technically accomplished takes a long, long time. It takes a lot of practice, this. As you can see, his letters are really tightly executed. You don't get to do that overnight. You're going to have to work on that for quite a long time. This is like you're into like the realm of sign writing skills and stuff like that. If you can execute fonts really kind of like graphically perfectly. I don't like the word perfect, but you know what I mean. Very, very tight font work. And again, he's provided us with an extreme foreground in the shape of this line down here. And again, if you look at the left hand side of the shadow it casts, it's landing on the fluorescent cloud, and so it casts that green shadow. On the right hand side it casts a much darker mauve shadow, which again gives us this illusion of depth and an object in space. Let's look at our last one. So this one, he really goes to town on all kinds of stuff. So you got a general nice contrast of a beautiful sort of aqua blue and a sort of grasshopper green. Little Top Cat character, always love a character. Notice that his right hand is throwing a shadow onto that blue. There are little tiny bits of shadows that just hint at light source and where light source is coming from. On this one, he's got the light source on the right hand side, top right. So we got highlights on the right hand side of the characters. the shadows are being thrown to the left. His shadows from the letters are being thrown onto the sort of the white background in grey, as you can see, and he's done this sort of blue splash in the background, which is there's also a shadow being thrown onto that. He's got extreme foreground again in the shape of this line, this sort of whip line, and again that's throwing shadows onto three different objects here, onto your sort of aqua blue letter, and then this sort of bluey backgroundy, sort of indigo blue background, and then onto the grey. So you get three lots of shadow, all married up completely technically perfectly, as you can see, which really sells the idea of this being an object in space, a solid object. Also got to talk about this bit, which is very nicely executed, really nicely executed. So you got, I mean, the differing value is done here, and how neatly he's done it. This is not easy to do, creating this O like this. He's used a green onto the green. He's used a much darker purple in the background. He's got a shadow being thrown from the letter onto that O. And then there's a little sort of cartoon explosion in the background. He's changed the value of that to darker values as the overlap. It's all very nice. It's beautifully technically done, but it's also cleverly done. You've got to really know what you're doing to pull this stuff off. It takes a fair bit of practice, as anybody will tell you who's ever tried to do this sort of stuff. This takes a lot of practice. So really, really lovely where he's got these big fat drips that come down. There's a lot of movement in it. His explosion over here adds some movement. The lines coming off it add movement. He's got sticky bits between his letter bars and stuff. That adds a bit of movement, and there's just a lot of movement, a lot of dynamism. There's dynamism in the letters. There's sort of flow. There's again, it's a very dynamic piece that is full of movement, and it's sort of too generic to say that it's style, but it is. It's obviously, there's lots of style in it, but the definition of that really is that it feels like it is a real object in space, and that takes a lot of practice. If you look at these letter bars as well, just a quick note on these letter bars, notice the way that they sort of, this one on the K, on the left hand side of the K, it flares out slightly at the bottom, then it flares out slightly at the top, and it bends round to the bottom right. That just adds movement. It's not a static letter. It's already moving. Even at that stage, he's put movement into the letter. Then you've got this huge sort of arcing leg on the K, which throws a whole load of new movement in there. The top bar on the K to the right doesn't look as if there's very much movement in it at all, but there is a little bit actually. It's moving up. It's slightly arcing up to the top right. So there's even movement in that, and it's very subtle. Again, artists like ERGH, I talk about this quite a lot. This sort of principle of less is more. I mean, really take it on as a precept. Take it on, because this guy embodies that. Less is more. You know, you could go absolutely wild with this sort of stuff, but actually, the subtlety of his line and his movement gives it so much more. It's not over-egged. It's just beautifully poised. So that's ERGH. Now, I want to look at one more artist, and it's an interesting choice, this, for fonts, because this is Hombre. Now, Hombre is better known for his character work. He's predominantly a character artist, and we love his characters. Crazy about Hombre's characters. But Hombre does some really beautiful straight letters as well. So let's talk about Hombre's straight letters. Now, here's a good example of them. Now, he has stuck a character on the end there, and always happy to see an Hombre character. Let's just talk quickly about the form. So there's a uniformity of size, and sort of, if you notice that the first letter contains curves and straight lines, the second letter is curves and straight lines, the third letter is curves, pretty much, you know, a couple of straight lines, mostly curves, but curves and straight lines, and then the final letter is basically straight lines. And it's beautifully put together. He makes it look ridiculously simple. I mean, the fill on this as well looks ridiculously simple. It's a ghost fill done in a very kind of quick manner. It's a very particular style, this, that's grown over the years. If you're interested in graph, then you probably love this kind of fill. It's just great, isn't it? Just lovely. And look at it. What I'd encourage you to do is look at the fill on the S, because you can see the way that he's done it. It's not just it's not slapdash. It's he's angled it round for the fill on the S, and you can see it on the upper bar of the R to the left. All them lines are horizontal. If you look at the big curve, then they're all vertical. So all these lines are very specific. They're all specific fill lines. I mean, any experienced grapher would tell you that's what you've got to do. But you're seeing it in action here. So you've got big, fat, drippy highlights on the top there. Although light source with these things is not that important, because this is more of a sort of, he's done a sort of a deliberately dirty style. Although to call it dirty really does it a bit of a disservice, because it's so clean. I'd point you in the direction of the negative space. There's virtually none. There's very little, basically. There's as much negative space as is needed, so that you can delineate the shapes of these letters and no more. Very nice use of negative space. Close it up. It's always a good. I mean, you know, there are obviously alternatives to that, but closing up negative space will give you very nice effects. Often, you know, when in doubt, particularly if you're a beginner, if you're really struggling with letters and stuff, close up negative space, and you'll probably see an improvement in your work almost straight away. And of course, just a sort of an obvious point, he's basically used two colours or three colours here. That's basically what he's used. I mean, two colours if you want to be pedantic, and different values of a colour. But, you know, there's a sort of orangey yellow and a blue. And that's about it, you know. Bit of pink. I mean, it's worth bringing your attention to the fact that his tag work is in white, and he's put a pale blue key line on, which offers a contrast that we don't initially notice. And then he's offered a contrast in these neon pink lines and a little heart. Tiny details. Remember, less is more? Less is always more. This is a perfect example of that. Less is more. And, I mean, you know, just to reiterate as well, the form is just gorgeous. It's really beautiful form. These letters are really simple. They're really nicely put together. It takes a long time to be able to put form like that together so simply and really make it. I mean, this, I just want to highlight this tiny little shadow at the top of the eye. It's just great. Really, really great. That's the sort of stuff that really sells this. Let's look at another. So this one, all in a sort of throwy style. Throwy styles are sort of famous for the fact that they're very speedy to execute, obviously, because they're essentially used by bombers. Often very stylish in a graffiti kind of way. I mean, you could argue it's a stylishness that's often only really appreciated by graffiti writers. I don't know anybody outside graffiti who particularly love this kind of style, but we do, right? One layer, very light blue, outline, darker blue. Then a really light. He's actually put highlights on. Not everybody puts highlights on a throwy because you don't always have time or anything like that. But these have got little highlights on them up the top in that sort of light turquoisey colour. Very nice. Look at the line tapering again. There's something very aesthetically pleasing about tapering lines. It just works. Just really, really works. There are writers who use non-tapered lines, and they use them quite deliberately, and it's a different effect. But there's something very aesthetically pleasing about tapering your lines. Again, you know, if you're a beginner and you're struggling to make your pieces look clean, is the word that is used a lot. If you're struggling to make your pieces look clean, then taper your lines. Taper lines in and see what happens. So obviously he's got a sort of sprayed background, flary sprayed background, that kind of stuff. But the piece itself is nice and tight, offers a huge contrast to its background. It's just a really beautiful piece, isn't it? All the letters the same sizing, they've all got the same dynamic, they've all got they've got a slight kind of backwards lean on them. Yeah, just a really beautiful little throwy style. This drop shadow in the same colour as the outline, obviously. It's a really lovely piece. So I'm just going to highlight one more thing, which is the bar on the E at the end, which, because it's a throwy is sort of, because of the nature of the throws are always done very quickly. Whether you do them on paper or canvas or walls or whatever, they're always done incredibly quickly. So the rules that apply to other sort of pieces don't necessarily apply to throwies. You can overlap hard lines, which is what he's done with the E and the R here. That's an overlap of a hard line, just cut straight through the other line. Because it's a throwy style, you can do that. And the fill generally, you'll notice, is done in a really kind of quick, rough, horizontal, bang, 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 bang kind of way, which is why you get these big streaks through it, where there's basically nothing there. It's all done with the execution, a very swift execution. That's the feeling you want to get from it. You never want to get the feeling with a throwy that somebody spent 3 hours doing it, because that defeats the object. Doesn't matter whether it's on a wall or paper or a tablet or whatever. You want to always get the feeling of extreme movement, extreme speed. That's the aesthetic of a throwy. And this final one, I absolutely love this piece. It was sort of, I think it was a backdrop to, he'd done a character at one side of this, and I'm a bit of a sucker for painted hand style like this. Bacon does this sort of stuff as well. And this is a beautiful painted hand style. It's got a 3D on it, and he's done a sort of yellowy fade in the 3D, in the white 3D, because he's done a white outline on this, and he's done the 3D the same colour as the outline, and then he's just done a bit of a sort of highlight or low light in a light yellow, which works really beautifully. He's got this sort of yellow key line, partial key line, that stands off the piece just to give you a little bit more detail. And of course he's got this beautiful SUK for Stick Up Kids down the bottom right hand, which is, again, it's a different font. And this is what I really want to point out about this whole wall, really, is that, so you go from this beautiful hand style font that is painted full size there, then you drop down to this little gold font down here. He's put a brown outline on it. It's got a yellow fill. Gorgeous little piece in and of itself there, with a little white crown on it. Lovely. I haven't even mentioned the drop shadow on the hand style, actually. After the 3D, he's done a little tiny, can you see that? There's a little shadow actually coming off that hand style piece. And then the background, you've got this amazing sort of gorgeous mauve purpley pink extreme background, and it's a very nice idea. This, I've seen it effectively used by other artists over the years. I've never actually done it myself. I must do it one day, where you use different values of your same background colour. So like up on the left, he's done a full ombre piece, and it's in darker shades of purple, which still pushes it into the background. Because if you're going to use a hard black and a hard white, you're going to bring that piece all the way into the foreground. So all your purple stuff is going to sit on the background. Then he's got this very, very quick throwy style on the right hand side there. Really, really rough, and the ghosty fill and everything, offering a beautiful contrast. Then he's got other letters that are sort of hinted at to the right and the left of the piece. He's got a big flary stick up kids tag down on the left hand side. Gorgeously done. Really, really beautifully done. I absolutely love this wall. It's the essence of graph for me. This is the essence of graph. He's managed to get at least 4 styles onto that wall and a tag style. So, congratulations, Ombre. That is a fantastic wall. And bear in mind, this is a guy who is not predominantly a letter artist, and this is something I talk about quite a lot, which is, as a grapher, you've got to be able to rock the alphabet, even if you're a character artist. I'm a character artist. I mean, I can't do font work as well as Ombre, but I've still got to be able to do font work to some degree. Otherwise, you're not a graffiti writer. I mean, technically, I've heard the definition before saying that if you can do characters but you can't do letters, it instantly puts you into a sort of street artist category. I mean, this is semantics, right? It's a semantic argument, but that means a lot to people who are on our scene. Are you a graffiti writer or are you a street artist? Because them two things are different. We write our names. It's a very big thing in graph. You could argue it's the thing. Even as character artists, we still write our names. It's what we do. Anyway, there's 2 straight letter artists and a bit of a dissection of their work. I hope you enjoyed that. And if you did, tune in for more.